So, you are a film school graduate.
Yes, not here though. Sorry.
No. Where is there anything that you took away? It's a lot of folks here in film school, this one or others. Is there anything that you took away from your film school experience that you would advise them to do? Is there anything that was useful that you might not think they know?
Yes, but it's going to sound weird. I mean, it was great to write a lot while I was in school. Like, I graduated with like 3 features and like a couple spec TV shows, and just getting my worst scripts out when no one cared about me was really good. But also just like practical things. Like, I remember like we had one like conference and the woman was like, so when you go to a meeting, like all you really need is just like nice shoes and a nice bag. And I was like, okay. And then later I was an assistant to a manager and he was like, I really liked your bag at the interview. Pretty good.
Well, that kind of leads into my next question. I was going to ask you, is there something that you learned after film school that's been more important than what you learned in school? But clearly it was about bags.
No, definitely. And also just stuff like about like how to go to drinks with people, like how many drinks is too many drinks, like how to just not be weird, I think. And like that when you go to a meeting, you're not supposed to dress like you're going for a job interview. You're supposed to dress like you because you're selling yourself.
Right.
Is my mic really weird?
Is her mic really weird?
I'm hearing feedback. Great.
Okay, good.
Yeah, and so like that's a big journey of like figuring out that you're the commodity and that you're selling yourself.
Okay, good. Thanks. So we just watched Just Between Us, which I love. You guys need to check it out. It was fantastic. So your partner's Gabi Dunn, who we saw in the episode. And you guys are very different people, which I think is the nature of the show, right? You call it an odd couple comedy. How did it begin? Where did it start? What was the concept?
It was very low concept. We met doing stand-up in LA, and I was just like, as you saw, just like pretty free and like needed a friend. So I friended her pretty hard because she just moved from New York. And we, we're hanging out and she was like, we're so different. We're so different. Someone should listen to us talk. And I was like, okay. And then we were like, okay, well, we'll do a web series. Because I'd actually taken a class at USC about web series. And my teacher was like a writer on The Big Bang Theory, like the only successful network show, and was like, listen, it's all going to the internet. And I was like, okay. I was very susceptible to any sort of advice in college. And so we wanted to come up with something that was like easy to do and easy to maintain, because we realized that like releasing a video once a week is really important. Even if you like can release a great sketch like once every 4 months, like you're not gonna grow an audience. So we kind of came up with this odd couple fake advice show. And so that's kind of how the channel started, was like the two of us on a couch, like answering like viewer questions that I had made up, and pretending we had an audience.
Do they come from real viewers now?
Oh yeah, now they do. Well, now we don't really do that anymore because the channel's like kind of grown and evolved. But yeah, now we like actually get questions. But for a while, like it would be like, this is from Brad from the Staples Center. Which is like and then we started working at BuzzFeed, and then once we quit BuzzFeed, we then had the time to do like actual sketch on the channel. And so that's the part of the channel that I like the most, which is what you guys saw.
Cool. So what's your production schedule like? When do you write? When do you shoot? How often do you shoot?
Well, now the channel it's on the back burner. We're still releasing, but we took a little bit of a break because we just had a bunch of other projects. But at its height, we were releasing a couch video every Monday and a sketch every Thursday, which was a nightmare. So we would shoot like maybe 3 or 4 couch shows at a time, and then we'd have every other week we'd do a 2-day sketch shoot.
Okay.
And I got to tell you, I ran out of ideas quick.
Right.
Yeah, because it's like 2 girls in an apartment.
Twice a week.
Well, once a week for sketch.
For sketches, yeah. But so the audience is incredible. I mean, so many people have followed the show, and it's led to other things for you. What is it that you've taken away that your audience appreciates? What is it that you think that they love about the show?
That's so hard. I mean, I think that a lot of it is the dynamic. I think that it's people like seeing 2 female best friends, and the fact that like we prioritize friendship over pretty much anything. And so like hashtag best friend goals, that kind of thing. And I mean, also it's for us, it's always pretty much comedy first, at least for me. Gabi would just like monologue for an hour and a half about her feelings if I let her. But that's why she has her own channel. You can check that out there. And just like trying to keep it tight and consistent. And I think also that we talk about real subjects, but without them feeling dire. Like there's a lot of stuff about mental health. There's a lot of stuff about the LGBTQ community. And we even talk about how much we fight, and so I think hopefully like that relatability and not like pretending that we're perfect in any way has been part of the appeal.
Right. I think you kind of caught lightning in a bottle, with this, and it's led to other things. And I would, a lot of, we teach web series here, and it's something that I advocate strongly. It's, I've made a web series with Anna, who you'll see later today. What would be your advice for folks who are thinking, I maybe want to use YouTube as a launching pad to other things, because it certainly has led to a lot of different things for you.
Yeah.
And where do we begin? What would we need to know?
Great. This would be a much easier question like 3 years ago. Now YouTube, I don't think that YouTube is what it used to be anymore. Okay. I think it's a lot harder to like break through. And I think right now what's only popular is a lot of like beauty bloggers. Mm-hmm. So maybe do like a parody of a beauty blogger. I mean, there's different reasons to do YouTube. One is like just the fact that you're constantly making content is going to make you a better creator. And like the amount of garbage I went through and like just the sheer amount of like screen time I've done has made me obviously a better actress. In terms of launching a career, I think like it's just as much of a gamble as kind of doing anything else. But to grow an audience on YouTube, it's really about consistency and like releasing at the same time every week, and like that the audience knows kind of what to expect from you. But I also think that there's a huge benefit in, instead of like releasing a video every single week, having like a contained web series that like you'll have on YouTube, but also you can submit to festivals, and also you just have as like a way to show what your work is, because people are always going to want to watch a 3-minute video instead of read your feature. Sure.
And it has really great production value. Was that something you guys considered from the beginning? Was that a big... No,
our first few videos, you can't see us because it's so dark. But once we moved into sketch, we like, brought in a director and a DP, and, we made it a point to try to make that better. And then since then, our main director has left, and now I direct the sketches.
Oh, cool. Mm-hmm. Great. So, and then you recently have written a book, and now another eventually, right?
Well, that's a big announcement.
Oh, sorry. Speaking of which, we have 2 copies of I Hate Everyone But You. And we're going to do a raffle for them via social media. So we're going to do an Instagram and a Twitter raffle. So tweet something about this panel, Allison, Courier 12, and Insta something about it, and we'll choose the one we love, and that person will get a free copy of Allison's book. So,
should I tell them what the book is?
Yeah, tell them what the
book. You might not want it.
Yeah, if you don't want it, then don't tweet, right?
It's a YA novel about 2 best friends who separate for the first semester of college, and one goes to USC and one goes to Emerson, and it's all of their texts and emails during that first semester, and it's sort of will the friendship survive? It's like a friend-com instead of a rom-com.
With a really unique format. This idea of, I'm going to write a whole novel in texts and emails, and what was the genesis of that concept?
I wish I remembered. I really don't. I mean, we had the idea a while ago, and I don't know where that came from. I think we probably were just thinking about it strategy-wise and how to like turn the channel into a book, and that made the most sense. And it's like a big tip. You guys are significantly younger than me, but like whenever you make your characters younger, the stakes are always higher, because when you're in high school or you're in college, everything is a huge deal. So like that's a great trick. Like you don't always need to have like as much plot, but just the very fact that you're 18 and your hormones are raging, you're like, everything's terrible. And so we kind of like, aged down our Allison and Gabi from the channel into Ava and Jen for the book. And it was kind of a whirlwind experience. Normally for novels, you have to write the whole thing, especially for your first novel, and then get an agent, and then have the agent sell, whatever. And because we had this following already, we were in New York for another reason, and we recently signed with UTA, who we're no longer with, and we met with a book agent, and we thought we were going to have to write like a YouTuber book, where it was like how to date or whatever. Probably would have sold better. But we like pitched her this novel idea, and our agent was like, yes, that one. And literally that day we had like a meeting with Simon & Schuster, and they were like, okay, we want it. Yeah, it was bananas. And then we got like a bidding war, and we ended up with Macmillan and a great editor. And so it was a very surreal experience, because I ended up selling it off of like a 4-page treatment. And so it's great to avoid work.
Do you think,
do work earlier, and then you don't have to do as much.
Right. I mean, do you think the show helped?
Oh yeah, absolutely, because they were buying our audience. Like our editor literally, because we wrote the entire thing before sending anything to our editor, because the contracts take so long, and my reps are so afraid of everything. They were like, well, we can't send it to her before the contracts are signed, because maybe she'll hate it so much she'll cancel. And so by the time we finally like sent her the novel, she was like, here we go. Ooh. Like she didn't know if we could write a book or not. Like, I think she was probably pretty worried. And then luckily she was like, oh, there's very few edits, which was really a relief, because we were rapidly running out of time.
Sweet. And so you're writing another book?
Yes, so that's the big announcement, you guys. It's actually, we're announcing it officially on Monday, but we did get a sequel for the book that is coming out in July.
Awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's big news.
That one's called Please Send Help.
Great. So what role, how active are you guys with social media around the show and the books and the projects, and has that helped?
Yeah, I view social media as part of my job. Like I didn't really have Instagram before I started working at BuzzFeed, really, and I think it's dumb, and I hate it. So, like I view it as like something I have to do to maintain a following. But honestly, like my social media has like fallen significantly in like the last year, and so has the channel. But like luckily enough, like because we put in that work and we got the meetings, and now like my career is much more like a traditional writer's career, like movies and books and TV, and so it was like the YouTube got me to be able to now like survive on that. So like this in my head, I'm like, okay, social media isn't as important to me as it used to be, because now I've kind of gotten my foot in the door in the more like long form stuff.
So we should all
please follow me on social media. Yeah. I could really use the bump. I had my first viral tweet this year, so that was really exciting. A few weeks ago. It was just a me sad, I think, mostly. Yeah. But memes shared it, like meme accounts shared it, so that was like huge for me. I love memes.
Sweet. So you broke through.
Yeah, I really did. I really like of all the things I've accomplished, like that really was like very exciting for me.
But I mean, you've published videos with hundreds of thousands of views.
Yeah, millions. And I was like, oh my God. Like my therapist says, retweeted my tweet. I was like, woo!
Nice job. So obviously a great follow at Allison Raskin, like everywhere, right?
Please.
Yeah.
Please.
So with the show and the book, you and Gabi are funny almost all the time, right? That's like there's some little dramatic moments, but it's almost always funny. But you do take on mental health, body issues, all of this stuff that's really important and meaningful, especially to your audience, which I think is probably largely women. How do you balance we have something to say that's important, but we also have to be funny? Like what is the line, and how do you weigh that?
Well, I think like that's honestly why I picked that video, because to me, like I wanted to like talk about like sex positivity, and like Gabi is much more vocal about that stuff, and I've always felt like I'm not, and so I was like, well, am I in a way like slut shaming because I don't feel comfortable about talking, and then it's like, no, like that's not true. Like it's just about supporting other women and like being like, you can live your life your way, but like you just support women doing whatever they want to do, and so like that was my version of tackling an important subject. So you like take it like a sketch, and then you just make the theme of the sketch like what you want to talk about.
Go ahead.
Probably one of my favorite videos we've done is like we get so many horrible comments on YouTube, and it's like really hard to like not take them personally, and so instead of like doing a vlog where I was like, how dare you say I'm a feminazi old slut bag whore, like I was like, well, how do I make this a sketch? And so I wrote a sketch where it's like behind the scenes. It's actually all one shot, and it's as though we're getting ready to shoot a sketch, but we can't focus because we keep reading these comments that people write to us and like losing our mind. And like an ongoing thing is like, am I pregnant? Like, I don't know.
So it seems like you have a really open channel to content. So I read something, it bugs me, and rather than let it bug me, I'm going to use it. Yeah. Or I have, this issue about sex positivity, and rather than like dwell on it and keep it secret, I'm going to use it. And you use the stuff. So do you keep in touch with how you feel and think?
No, never.
Yeah. Is that, are you always evaluating?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
I mean, part of that is having been in therapy since age 4. But I think it's really important to like keep in touch with stuff. And, a lot of times, like things that I go through, I'm like, well, this is horrible, I'm going through it, but like maybe if I talk about it, it can help somebody else. And that's sort of like, I take like solace in that. Like in the last like year and a half, I gained like over 20 pounds on antidepressants, and like people noticed, believe me. And like my family noticed, and it became this whole thing. And I ended up doing a couch show where I talked about it and I addressed it, and it's probably our most popular video in like the last year or 2.
What was its title?
Why I've gained weight.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah, I didn't want to get that wrong.
Yeah.
but I remember seeing it. Yeah.
And it's like, and people were like, no one's talking about this. Like, thank you for talking about that. And so I think that there really is something for being like, what am I currently going through that I can somehow like use to get ad money?
Brilliant. Because, you are an artist, you have something to say, you want to entertain, but at the end of the day...
It's about money.
It's about money.
Yeah.
Right? Do you have a process for keeping track of this? Because you are massively prolific. You're constantly working, books, movies. We haven't got to this yet, television. How do you keep track of ideas? How do you decide what to write when? What is your process for managing your own content river?
I mean, I just kind of try to follow whatever's working and whatever people will pay me for. And so, at the beginning of this year, I had to write a book, and I had to write a 12-episode scripted podcast, and I also had to write a movie. And I was like, oh no. Because like the year before, like nothing, like there was just like months of having nothing, because I was like either waiting for deals to close, or I was trying to sell things, or I was just like losing my mind. And then suddenly I was like, oh, I have these 3 big projects, and they're all completely different. But then luckily with the movie, the execs just took so long to get back to me on the treatment, I could finish the other stuff. Right. So like sometimes like, like things like that will hold you up, and then, sort of like figuring out the right schedule. So like with the gossip, like I would have the days gossip, I kind of had to cram into that's the podcast into like 1 month. I had to write 12 scripts. And so I was like, here we go.
Right.
And like, I just sat in my house and wrote them. And then the book, like, again, we had like a very strict deadline, and I was just like, and here we go, and like, just sort of like did it the way I could do it. Like I normally only operate on weekdays. I am a very firm believer in business hours, because I think otherwise you go insane. But with this deadline, I was like, I have to work weekends. This is like a weird time in my life where like I have to do that. And you just have word counts that you're trying to hit every day, or page counts, and then you have to do it.
Do you have any little tricks that you tease yourself with? Like, if I finish this, I get that, or...
Yeah, if I finish this, I won't be consumed with overwhelming guilt and anxiety.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Because we were talking about this last night. We're out at Second City and having a good time, and I stupidly check my phone, right? And then on my phone is an email from a producer like, hey, Brad, how's the script going? And you're like, fuck.
Yeah.
There went my night. Like now I'm all bummed and guilty.
Yeah.
And, I've always talked about how guilt will devour your writing career. Mm-hmm. So if you take a couple days, you take more than a couple days, you're not doing the work, and it's supposed to be done, and it starts to mount, starts to pile on, then all of a sudden you're crippled by
I've been doing that recently, though. It's kind of fun.
Letting yourself get crippled by guilt?
I just like I've not been as proactive as I normally am. Like I'm rewriting the movie right now, and it's taking me much longer than it normally would. But I'm also like, who cares? They take forever to get back to me.
Right.
You know, like I think sometimes you have like I think I kind of burnt myself out a little bit at the beginning of this year, and so like you kind of have to like figure out what works, and I'm sure like there'll be a time soon where I am writing much more every day. But for right now, like that I'm not capable of giving that, and I'm trying to be like nice to myself about it. But again, that's the meds. So
sweet.
Yeah.
So I've been in that position before where you're working on multiple things, and if you get it just right, you've got that notes window. You're waiting for the slow people to get back to you with the notes.
Right.
And then you can get maybe that treatment done or maybe that first draft done, and then the notes come back and you send that off. And do you find it easy to stack that, or is it sort of a challenge?
I mean, I forever have had the channel happening, so I'm used to not focusing on one thing at a time, because on top of everything that we do, then also operating a YouTube channel. I feel like it's very dangerous to only have one project. I think it is like one of the biggest mistakes creators make. I think if you put all that you have into one thing, then you can lose all that you have. So for me, it's a numbers game. It's like, how do I have multiple pots in the fire? How do I, I'm throwing spaghetti at the wall. Like if this fails and I have this, like, I'll get to a point where like, I'm currently have projects, but I'm like, but what about 4 months from now, manager? Like, I just like call my manager and I'll be like, I have nothing. And he's like, you have 4 things. And I'm like, yeah, for right now. But like, what about the future, And I think you kind of always have to be thinking that way, or else, like, at least for me, when it's nothing, that's like when it's the scariest time.
Speaking of which, have you found yourself, I mean, you've been so busy, but have you found yourself in a moment where it's like, I really do not know what I want to write right now?
Yeah.
Okay, and so how do you source an idea? How do you source like the next thing? Other than the meds.
Yeah, I love meds. It's a different thing. So, one of my favorite show that I've ever written that I pitched this year that nobody bought, that idea kind of came from me like walking around with my friend and being like, I love this type of show. I want to do this kind of thing. And just like, it wasn't that I had this idea, like, and then I remembered this thing that I'd heard about, like this story that I went to boarding school, and in 1984, like 15 kids got expelled for like smuggling cocaine from Venezuela. And I was like, why haven't I written about that yet? Yeah, it was 1984. It was a crazy time, but and so I wrote a half-hour comedy about like kids in I made up, and like that came from that, and then Gossip, which is the podcast, my manager was like, you should sell a scripted podcast, and I was like, how did that? Because he thinks for me. It's great. He's always strategizing, and he's always figuring out like how to build the career and where I need to hit and all that. Like, I don't even know what he does behind the scenes.
He's very protective of you.
Oh, is he?
He's great.
Yeah, he's the best.
Yeah.
I love Matt. And so he was like, we got to get you into the scripted podcast space because, Gabi already had an unscripted podcast that had really accelerated her career. And I was like, okay. And so people are always like, well, how'd you come up with this idea? And I was like, I just had to. Like, I had to come up with something that would work in that space because audio is so different because you like can't have more than 3 people talking at a time really, or you can't follow the story. You also sort of need a narration device so that you can understand like what is happening. Right. And for that, I was like, well, what do I like? And I was like, well, I like primetime soap operas. And I was like, maybe I'll just write one of those. And then I was like, okay, so I'm gonna write a primetime soap opera comedy and with women in it. And then I was like, and now fill in the rest.
Now, so with that, so speaking of Gossip, you guys should check out Gossip. Has anybody heard it yet? I see, yeah, a few hands. So it's iTunes and Stitcher, right?
It's everywhere.
It's everywhere. So it's lightning fast. And I'm curious, and obviously it's all dialogue. So exposition, visualization, they're kind of the things that we harp on in film school. And you have to sort of work around all of that because exposition has to obviously be verbal, almost like in a play.
Yeah.
And then visualization, you have to find little cheats for looks. And so was that hard for you coming off your intensive screenwriting background, or was that easy?
I mean, it was really difficult to realize how much like I normally rely on reaction shots, like especially in comedy, like that's huge. Like that's how you like keep the momentum, that's pacing, that's everything. But like you can't have that because then it's just silence. It doesn't really work. And so figuring out how that would work, and also just like figuring out like how the listener can know what is going on, you know, because the conceit of the show is 3 women meet for coffee every week and gossip about their small town, their suburban town. But then like if it's my week, I'll be like, you'll never believe what happened, blah, blah, and then we transition into the actual scene. So like figuring out like the audio cues, like how many we tried so many different audio cues to like let like what the brain will then realize, oh, okay, so now we're going into this scene. And like, you know, as you listen to more and more episodes, I'm sure it becomes easier and easier, but like figuring out like how an audience can actually understand was really difficult. But in terms of it being all dialogue based, that's great for me because I love dialogue and I hate the other parts. Action lines. If you read my scripts, like the action lines are like whoa, and then just dialogue.
So gossip per episode is what, like 20 minutes-ish, something
like 15 to 20.
15 to 20. So how many pages per script? Were they like 25 pages?
Yeah.
Like 20,
Yeah, around there.
It's Sorkin-like pace, man. It's, you know.
Because I also directed all of them. And so I think because of my sketch comedy background, I was like, we got to keep going. Let's keep going. You know, and like and what's great about audio is like so many of those lines that you're hearing are from 2 different takes. Like literally the lines, you know, and then I'd be like, and take this pause out. And like, you're really like assembling it in a way that you can't with visual. And for me, the pacing is important because like it's a comedy, you know, and like you want to keep going. You want that excitement, but also finding the fine line of like, is it too fast? Is there time for people to laugh at the jokes? Like that sort of thing.
And sound design, you probably learned a lot about sound design.
Yeah, I had a great sound engineer, and like, you know, we really worked together, and he would really, you know, like create these scenes and like really make them like work so much more. But then there'd be like, one of the things I'm absolutely the worst at is picking music. And so like having to relay to him like what kind of music I would want for a scene. Like everything else I'm pretty direct and like people understand what I mean, but for music there would always be multiple back and forth because I was not making any sense. And then like eventually I'd be like, Jimmy Eat World, and he'd be like, okay.
Gotcha.
You know.
So directing then, so you direct obviously Just Between Us, you've directed sketches, I'm sure, you've probably directed some film even?
Yeah, I wrote and directed a short film I shot last November that
and
we're
then
now
the podcast.
submitting places.
So how do you feel?
And a music video.
And a music video, cool.
Pretty cool.
So I started directing only recently, and it was quite a different experience because everybody wants your opinion all the time.
I love it.
And you have to have an answer.
Yeah, I love that.
Red or blue, over here, over there, you know, this much or that much. And it kind of overwhelmed me sometimes, but you love it.
I love to be in charge. I also love to have people around me that I trust. So in those cases, if I don't know, then I'm like, whoever's in charge of whatever that thing is, I'm like, well, what do you think? And then I value their opinion, and then I'll go with their opinion. And then sometimes I'll take it back, but mostly, you know, I go with their opinion. And for me, like, I really struggle with like, the visual aspect of like cinematography, and so it's like really important to me that I am working with a DP who does understand that, and you know, because I don't have much of a production background, who like they can figure out lighting, you know what I mean? Like sometimes I'll look at the monitor and I'll be like, too dark, but like that's not my strength, and I think that it's important. Like obviously some directors know all of that, but for me, like I'm much more like an actor-based director and like a writer, but you know, and I love editing, you know, but the technical stuff, like I know that's not my strength. And so for me, it's just about teaming up with the right people who that is their strength.
One of the reasons I wanted to bring you is because you've really adopted this do-it-yourself, cover a lot of bases, put myself out there attitude as a writer. And I think back to when I was in film school and coming out. Back then, in the old days, we talked about the 90s, you know, at USC, you were either a TV writer or a feature writer, and that was it. You didn't ever consider doing both. And, you know, it was like, don't even think for a half a second that you're going to make your own stuff. That's not why you're here.
Yeah, but the technology was different then.
It was, and now I really advocate to my students, just do it yourself. Not that everybody has to want to be a director or a producer, but there are lots of directors and producers and people who would like to work on things, and you found some and collaborated. So how important is that right now to take charge of your, not just expect that you can hold a great screenplay up in the air and someone's going to grab it, but that you have to work to be discovered?
I think it's important. I mean, when people are like, well, how do I do this? I'm like, I really don't know. Because everyone's journey is so different. Like, I'm sure my career, if I even had a career, would look so different if I didn't randomly get hired at BuzzFeed during this weird time where they were doing residencies, so you didn't have to know how to edit. Like, it was such this weird time, and like that was like a couple of months where I luckily got a job there and I was able to be hired into their writers division instead of having to like shoot and edit, which was everyone else in the company. And it was like, I just got lucky, And so I think it's like about just being open to opportunities and also putting it out there what you want to do. Like a lot of times if people don't know, then they won't think of you for things. But if you're like literally on Facebook being like, hello, I would like to PA on a indie short in an indie film that's maybe not in Los Angeles, then someone will know that you're willing to do that. And when their friend needs PAs in Oregon or whatever, they're like, oh, well, and I think there's some power to that. And I also think I know a lot of people who are like, I want to be a director, and so I'm going to work for this director for years and years and observe. And I'm like, okay, cool, but are you directing? And I think with writers, it's like we're easier because we don't need the money. We don't need production money to write. But then it's like, write stuff that you can also make. Because I think that's huge. I think it's very important to hear what your words sound like out loud with actors. Is that working? Is it not? Like, a big thing about when I'm directing is like, if an actor is stumbling over a line, I'm like, how would you say it?
Right.
And like, unless it's so crucial for a plot point or a joke, I'm like, just say it the way you would say it. And like, you learn to write better for people and like the way people speak. And again, like, the biggest thing I can say is like, people would much rather watch your 3-minute video than read your script.
Yep.
And so if you have that, then that's huge.
So, yeah, when you're organizing your long form stuff, so I know you write features, you write pilots, you write novels. What is your outlining, developing process personally? Like, when you're not working with agents or managers, but like, I'm going to sit down and write this thing now. How do you organize? Are you a sequence person? Are you hugely structural?
I don't know what sequences are.
Yeah,
I've tried.
That's really like heartbreaking. Like,
I think that's what you taught me.
Yeah. I'm an utter failure. Clearly not. But how do you organize your thoughts and come up with a plan for these longer narratives?
It depends on the show. So I hate outlining, but obviously you have to do it. For TV, for half hours, I feel much more confident in my ability to write a half hour. Every time I write a feature, I literally take out Save the Cat, and I'm like, what is this? I'm like, what's an act? And I've written probably over 10 features, and every time I sit down to write one, I'm like, boop. And I think it gets different when you are writing on your own versus when you've sold a project, because when you've sold a project, you have to turn in that outline. You have to turn in that treatment because they have to approve it before you can go to script. So that's really taught me more how to do that, because a lot of times before I would just kind of like start writing and then kind of figure it out as I went, which is good and bad. I think that a lot of my best projects have been easier to write, and the projects where I'm like, I don't know how to make any of this work aren't good. But everyone has to figure out their own tricks. And for me, a lot of times my outlines are very long and they include a lot of dialogue. Like, I wrote a show for Super Deluxe, and that didn't sell, but it was what an experience. And that outline was very long because the way that the show was, I needed to write the dialogue to understand what the tone was, because it was like kind of wacky. And then they actually were like, this outline's like too long. And they kind of like made me go back and like streamline the outline more and like get to the heart of the scenes more and then go to script. But it was important for me to have those dialogue exchanges in the outline so I could figure out what kind of show I was writing.
Yeah, so in the not so many years since you've graduated from film school, it sounds like you figured out, this is how I work, and then adapted that project to project? Like, I feel like in this case I need to do this. I feel like in this case I need to do that, instead of having like this regimented development process for everything.
Yeah. But also every time I have to sit down to do something, I'm like, I have no idea how to do this.
Right.
Like, I don't know
But you
if
trust
I'll
yourself, it seems like.
I trust myself to get it done. I don't trust myself to make it good. And I think that that's really important. Like, I think it just needs to be done. And like, I've had friends who work on something forever and they're like, oh, I did 8 outlines and I've rewritten it 15 times and it's been months and months of work, and then you read it and it's like, it's fine, but I don't see that work on the page. Like, I think there's this big misconception that like you have to just like spend so much time on something for it to be good, and I just truly don't believe that. I think it's the same way where they say that stand-ups need to be on stage 7 nights a week, multiple times a night. And like, I'm sorry, I've seen those people and they're still not funny. So there's something to just like knowing your voice, believing in your voice, and just like getting the work done.
Right. So let's talk about TV. In the intro to Just Between Us on the homepage is this cute little video with your dad and Gabi's dad.
And my mom and my sister.
And your dad.
All our family.
Yeah, your whole family.
You didn't watch the whole thing, that's fine.
Yeah, well, the point that I'm trying to make is that your dad says, people don't know that you've written 3 pilots that sold but weren't made, which is, nothing unusual in this business. But I'm interested in those projects and what you think.
What went wrong?
What went wrong?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure they're great, but like things just don't line up sometimes. And why is? I mean, if you could speak to maybe why that is on 1 or 2 of them.
Yeah, each one had a different reason for failing.
They're not failed; they still exist.
They're failed. The first one is the most interesting story. Gabi and I sold a show to, I won't say what network, but you can figure it out. And we sold a show that was pretty much based off of Just Between Us. It was called Slut vs. Prude. And it was an odd couple comedy. And then the twist of the show was that my character, the prude, falls in love with her neighbor and thinks, oh my God, I finally found the perfect Jewish businessman. And it turns out that it's James Dean, the porn star, playing himself. And we shot the pilot. It was incredible. Chris Redd, who's now on SNL, was in it. It was directed by Tamara Davis, who did like Happy Madison and a ton of other things, huge TV director. It's like the best thing we've ever made. Just as we were going into testing and pretty much knew that the show was going to get picked up, James Dean was accused of rape. And I was in Lord & Taylor with my mom, and Gabi texted me, our show is dead. And I was like, great, tell me why. And it was because of this scandal. And so there was a couple weeks of the network trying to figure out, what to do. And we thought it was pretty obvious, just recast him. Because the pilot we shot, they did it non-union, so they wouldn't have to pay any money. And that basically meant that we were going to have to reshoot the pilot anyway. Like, some pilots are airable and some aren't, and this wasn't airable anyway. So we were like, who cares? Just like let's just get like Taylor Lautner to play the most famous porn star in the world. Like make it still a stunt casting, but like with someone who's not actually a porn star, or get a different porn star, you know what I mean? And they were like, no, like we just really think that the show is too tainted for us now. And so they killed it. And also made it so no one can ever watch it. Like won't let us show the video to anybody. So that sucked. Because we were like, every other comedy that they were developing that season got picked up. Like we were gonna have a TV show. And they were like, actually this man behaved badly, so you 2 young female creators don't get to have a show. And I wrote about that, and you can read it on Medium. Because it sucked, and it was really upsetting to find out that we thought we had sold a show because of us, and to find out we'd sold the show because of James Dean.
A porn star.
Yeah. Or whatever, it just like wasn't us,
Right.
And so that he, because the show was about us, and
Right.
like I wrote it, and it was so our voice, and like the majority of scenes were us together, but like they wanted that Deadline article that said porn star James Dean moves over to mainstream with Slut vs. Prude, and so they canceled it, not canned it. I wish they'd bring it back. And
how did you bounce back from that?
I didn't. I still think about it every day. No, I'm kidding. you just keep going, and we had an idea for a different show that was, because we both worked at BuzzFeed, and it was basically like if BuzzFeed was a full-blown cult. And honestly, not that far from what it was. And it was like a dark comedy, like very different, like much more of a world. And it was like people go missing, people die, like, like a different type of show. And we actually ended up selling that to FX and sold it on a pitch. And then I wrote the show, and they were like, had pretty like, they had notes, but like our management company had another show in development with them, and like they were like had to do so many outline, like ours was like pretty smooth sailing. But at some point I was like, this isn't an FX show. Like this isn't what they make. And because it was kind of like right when Atlanta had come out, and they were, and like Better Things, and it was really character-based stuff, and this was like a world-based show. And so when they passed, we were like, well, yeah, of course, this isn't a show for FX. And then we pitched it around everywhere else, and everyone was like, no, thank you. And we were like, good day. And then our third show died for a different reason. It was a YouTube Red show, where I hope I'm allowed to say all of this. I've never said it all publicly. It's exciting.
Exclusive information at Courier 12.
And then our third show was this show that we developed while we were, well, basically what happened was we got selected to do this Sundance lab with YouTube, like a co-lab, and we needed to have a project, and I was at a diner with Gabi, and between the time I went to the bathroom and came back to the table, I was like, what about this? And she was like, okay. And it was a comedy procedural about two girls who run this morality PI investigation. So it would be like you'd want to find out if like your fiance is a good or bad person, and then we'd like put them through a series of tests to find out. So like a PI business, but like weirder, and like zany and like, like an Office Place comedy. And YouTube took forever to decide that they wanted it. They paid me for a rewrite, and then they were like, they took just forever to read it, and then they were like, oh, okay, but we just like, we need a famous EP. We need like a famous name to be attached to the show. And we were like, oh, okay. So I'm like writing cover letters to like Diablo Cody and like anyone I could possibly, the agents like sending the script and like, please, like, it was such a crazy thing, because if this EP signed on, like, then the show would be made. Like, it was such an easy job for them, and everybody passed. And then YouTube was like, sorry. So each one was for a different wonderful reason.
Right.
A real variety.
Thank you for sharing.
No problem.
So we're going to go to audience questions and see if anybody has questions for Allison. Fire away.
Hey, Brad.
Hey. Hi, Maddie.
You're a former student. I'm a current student. So yeah.
Love it.
Yeah. So since you've developed all of this material and process with doing Just Between Us for so long, how do you take that, like, those like processes and convert them to putting comedy into like TV, or like a TV script or a full-length script? Like, how do you take all of the stuff you've developed and for sketch and put it into a full length?
Oh, I mean, I rarely like take a sketch and make it a TV show.
Right.
You mean like, more like, how do I pick which thing
creative
it should be?
Processes wise, like how do you switch your brain is what I'm saying.
Oh, this is like, people who are like, my brain is just a million miles a minute. I don't have that. I don't know. Like, I don't have that many thoughts. I kind of just like, there's no real answer other than like, I kind of like when I have a lot of times it's like, well, what makes sense for my career? What makes sense for me to write next? Like at a certain point I've gone out with too many shows. So now I was like, okay, so I should maybe transition into feature. Or like novel, and then I'm just like, well, that's what this is, and just kind of go from there. I try not to overcomplicate it that much, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I was just thinking more specifically, like when you're writing, like just already writing something, how do you like transition your comic brain from one to another? Sorry.
I mean, obviously, Just Between Us is the most jokey thing that I write. But all of my stuff is comedic, and I really think a thing that I really try to do is make sure that the reading of the script is fun, and so like when I do write an action line, there's always jokes in those action lines. And like my voice is very much like throughout the script, even if it's not the specific character. You know what I mean? Like it's like me narrating a script is sort of like how I imagine reading one of my scripts is. And so I use that across the board. And then it's really like the scene, you know, like you kind of like figure out what tone you're writing, and then you kind of like settle down into that. It's sort of like when you like like the difference when you're watching a sitcom or when you're watching like an hour-long drama, like your brain just sort of shifts and you grow to expect different things and you're just like in a different mood. It's probably the best way I can describe it. But I'm always, for the most part, writing comedy, and so having that sketch background has been like hugely helpful.
Cool.
Great, thanks.
Thank you.
Hi. In finding your comedic voice, how would you compare working on stage against working on YouTube?
I think that stand-up helped me so much because it helps you read a room. Like you figure out that like what's working, what's not working. That helps a lot in pitching, to be like, okay, like I can tell like within a minute if an executive likes me. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes I'm like, well, here we go, you know, like I know that whatever happens is not going to be great. But you can feel people out, you can vibe, you can figure out what kind of jokes people like, what kind of jokes people don't like, lean into that. You know, like in some rooms I can get away with like being like maybe a little like cursing a little bit more than I would in a different room. Love to curse. And I also think that stand-up really taught me like that you need to make every joke as short as possible, and like to just get rid of filler words and to just like get to the heart of everything. And then being on YouTube was great because like of actually having to write content, of like having to write sketch and dialogue, and then also just being on camera so much. So I think that like every part of the performer of me is just helping me be a better writer director.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Can you do one more question?
I love how they emerge from the darkness.
I know, it's just like there's a person.
Very exciting.
That was the last
Oh, wow.
question.
Okay,
no more
I guess I
questions?
answered everything. So.
Well,
Yeah.
anyway, Allison, thank you for being here.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me.